He came home early, not because he planned to, because the meeting had ended 40 minutes ahead of schedule, and because his driver had taken the faster route, and because sometimes the most important moments of a person's life arrive through the smallest coincidences. He heard it before he opened the door. Voices, children's voices, in his house. He had hired a maid 3 weeks ago. Agency recommendation. Good references. Quiet. Efficient. Asked no questions. He opened the door and stopped. His living room. The living room of a man worth $6 billion. With the furniture and the art and the particular silence of a space designed for one person, was full of children. 6 of them, maybe 7, sitting on his floor, on his carpet, with books open in front of them. And she, the woman he had hired to clean his house, was kneeling on his floor explaining something with the focused attention of someone who had done this her whole life. She hadn't heard him come in. He stood in the doorway and watched, and then one of the children looked up, and he recognized the face. He recognized the face because he had loved the father of that face like a brother, and the father had been dead for 2 years. He stood in his own doorway and felt something break open in his chest that had been closed for a very long time, and he understood that the woman on his floor was not a maid. His name was Nathan Cole. He was 44 years old and had been, for 15 of those years, building something. Not the kind of building that happened gradually and organically, the way cities grew or forests spread, the deliberate, specific, intentional construction of a man who had started with a clear picture of what he wanted and had executed against it with the precision of someone who had learned early that precision was the difference between wanting something and having it. Ashworth Capital had $6 billion in assets. Nathan lived alone. He had lived alone for 3 years since the divorce, which had been the kind of divorce that produced no drama and no public statements, and no particular bitterness, just the quiet conclusion of 2 people who had built a life together and discovered, over 8 years, that the life they had built was impressive and empty in equal measure. The house was large. He had bought it before the divorce, when the possibility of filling it had seemed real, and had kept it afterward because selling it would have required deciding what to replace it with. And he had not, in 3 years, made that decision. He hired a maid through an agency. Her name was Eleanor Vasquez. She was 36. The agency file said, experienced, reliable, excellent references, available immediately. She had started on a Monday and had been, in 3 weeks, exactly what the file said: quiet, efficient, present when needed, and invisible when not. He had not paid particular attention to her. This was something he would examine later. He came home at 2:15 on a Thursday. The Mercer Street meeting had concluded 40 minutes early, a rare occurrence, attributable to the particular efficiency of his counterpart, a woman named Dr. Park, who prepared thoroughly and spoke precisely, and had no interest in meetings running longer than necessary. He was in the car at 1:50. He did not call ahead. He heard the voices from the hallway before he had fully opened the door, before his eyes had adjusted to the interior light. Children's voices, which his house had never contained. which produced in him the specific disorientation of a sound in entirely the wrong context. He opened the door. His living room. 6 children. He counted them twice. Because the first count seemed improbable, sitting on his floor in a rough circle, books open, the particular focused posture of children who were being taught something and were interested in it. Elena Vasquez was kneeling at the center of the circle. She was explaining something. He could not hear the words yet, was still processing the image with the focused attention of someone who was not performing teaching but doing it. The way certain people do things because the things are worth doing rather than because they are being observed. She had not heard him. None of them had. He stood in the doorway of his $6 billion house and watched a woman he had hired to clean his floors teach 6 children on his carpet, with the complete absorption of someone who had forgotten or had never known that this was not her space to use. Then one of the children looked up. A boy, perhaps 8 years old, dark eyes. The particular shape of a face that Nathan had known for 20 years in a different face. The face of a man who had been his closest friend, his business partner, his best man. The person he had called first with every significant piece of news for 2 decades. The face of a man named James who had died of a heart attack at 41, 2 years ago, leaving behind a wife and a son Nathan had seen exactly 3 times since the funeral. Because grief had made him someone he did not recognize, and he had managed it by working and by not being in rooms where the grief had more space than the work. The boy looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at the boy. Eleanor turned. She saw him. Her expression, he would think about this later, would return to it with the specific attention of someone who understood that expressions contained information, was not guilt. It was not the expression of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the expression of someone who had been discovered doing something they had decided was right, and were now waiting to see what would be done with the discovery. Cole, she said. I can explain. Yes, he said. You can. She sent the children home first. Not rushed. She did not rush them, did not perform the apology of someone dismantling an inconvenient situation. She closed the books with the care of someone who understood that books deserved care, and she told each child what they needed to do before the next session. Marcus finished the chapter. Sophia practiced the sums on page 40. Daniel, I know, the boy said. The reading, she confirmed. All of it this time. I always do all of it, Daniel said. I know, she said. I just like to say it. He watched this exchange. The boy, Daniel, collected his book with the focused efficiency of a child who had somewhere to be and left with the others, and Nathan watched him go with the particular attention of someone who was looking at a ghost and trying to decide if the ghost was real. When they were gone, Eleanor stood and looked at Nathan directly. I owe you an explanation, she said. You owe me several, he said. Start with the children. They live in the buildings on Carver Street, she said. 3 blocks from here. Their parents work. They finish school at 2, and they have 3 hours before anyone is home. And she paused. They were sitting on the pavement doing their homework. Every day, when I walk past on my way here, So you brought them into my house, he said. I started sitting with them on the pavement, she said, for 2 weeks. Then November arrived. She held his gaze. It was cold. He looked at his living room, at the books still faintly visible in their arrangement, at the particular order she had created in a space that had been entirely hers to use for an hour each afternoon. You used my house, he said. Yes, she said. I should have asked. I know that. Why didn't you? Because, she said, I thought you would say no. And I thought the children needed this more than I needed your permission. He looked at her. That's honest, he said. I try to be, she said. The boy, he said. Daniel. Something shifted in her expression. Yes, his father, Nathan said. She was very still. His father, Nathan said, looked exactly like him. She looked at him. You knew James, she said. He was my best friend, Nathan said. For 20 years. She had known James for 4 years. Not through Nathan, through the school where she had taught before everything changed. Where James had come to speak to the parents about financial literacy, which was a subject he cared about with the particular passion of someone who had grown up without it and understood its absence. They had become friends the way certain people became friends, through the discovery of a shared language. In this case, the language of education and its importance, which both of them spoke fluently, and which was rarer to find than it should have been. When James died, she had been at the funeral. Nathan had been there too. She had seen him, had known who he was from James's descriptions, had watched him stand at the front of the church with the expression of someone who was holding something enormous very still because moving it would make it real. She had not introduced herself. James talked about you, she told Nathan. He said you were the most capable person he knew and that you dealt with loss by working until the loss couldn't find you. He was right, Nathan said. He also said, she said, that it was the one thing about you he worried about. Nathan was quiet. He asked me something, Eleanor said. Before he died, he didn't know he was going to die. Nobody knew. But he asked me, the week before, if I would look after Daniel. Not officially, just keep an eye on him. Make sure he had someone who took his education seriously. He asked you that, Nathan said. Yes, she said. Because his wife was managing everything else, and he worried that in the managing, the learning might get lost. She paused. James believed that learning was the thing that couldn't be taken away. He said it was the only inheritance that was theft-proof. Nathan looked at the window. He thought about 20 years of friendship and a funeral and 3 years of working. Until the working filled the space the friendship had left. I didn't know Daniel well enough, he said, after. I should have been more present. But you were managing, Eleanor said. In your way, you were managing too, he said. In yours, she looked at her hands. I lost my job, she said. The school closed. Budget cuts. I've been applying for 8 months. She paused. The cleaning work pays the rent. The teaching, she looked at the living room. The teaching is what I do because not doing it would be worse than everything else. He did not fire her. He had considered it, not seriously. But he had walked through the consideration as a matter of intellectual honesty. She had used his house without permission. She had brought children into his space. She had made a unilateral decision about his property. He had considered it for approximately 4 minutes. Then he had gone to find her in the kitchen where she was making tea, with the focused calm of someone who had accepted whatever was coming and had decided to face it with tea. The children, he said. What do they need? She looked at him. For the teaching, he said. Specifically, what resources do they not have that they should? Books, she said. Proper ones, not the ones the school sends home which are 3 years out of date. And space. Somewhere warm and consistent where they know they can come. They have this room, he said. She stared at him. 3 to 5, he said. Monday to Friday. I'm not home until 6. It's not being used, Mr. Cole Nathan, he said. And I'll order the books. Make a list. You don't have to. I know, he said. I want to. There's a difference. He paused. James would have wanted this. He would have done it himself if he stopped. Yes, Eleanor said quietly. He would have. Then, Nathan said, we're doing it for him. He started coming home at 5. Not a decision exactly, more the particular shift of priorities that happens when something worth coming home to exists. He told his assistant to clear his diary from 5 onwards, which his assistant received with the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this instruction for 3 years and was not going to say so. He met them one by one over the following weeks. Marcus, 7, quick with numbers, slower with patience. The particular combination that produced either brilliance or frustration depending on the day. Sophia, 8, the reader, who consumed books with the focused intensity of someone who understood that they were exits. Daniel, 8, James's son, who had his father's precision and his father's way of asking questions that were actually statements dressed as questions. And the others, Priya, Leo, Amara, Tom, each with their own specific quality. The particular fingerprint of a child who was becoming someone. Eleanor taught. Nathan watched. He had not planned to watch, had planned to work in his study from 5 to 6, to be present in the house without being intrusive. But the living room door was open and the voices were there, and he found, on the 3rd day, that he had migrated to the doorway. On the 5th day, Priya asked him a question. Do you know maths? She said, with the directness of a 7-year-old who needed an answer and was not interested in preamble. Yes, he said. Can you help me with this? She held up her book. He went in. He sat on the floor of his living room, which he had not sat on since he moved in, and helped Priya with her mathematics and felt something that he had not felt in 3 years and that he recognized from before as the particular warmth of being in a room that needed you. Eleanor caught his eye. She almost smiled. He almost smiled back. He talked to Daniel on a Wednesday evening. The other children had gone. Daniel had stayed. He often stayed slightly later, Eleanor had explained. Because his mother worked until 6, and there was no point going home to an empty flat. They were in the kitchen. Daniel was eating the snack Eleanor left for the late ones, something she made herself. Nathan had discovered from her own groceries. which he had discovered and had redirected to his account. Without telling her, because telling her would have produced an argument about necessity, and he did not want the argument. He wanted the snacks to continue. "Your father," Nathan said. "Did he tell you about me?" Daniel looked at him. "He said you were his best friend," Daniel said. "He said you were the kind of person who showed up." He paused. "He said that was rare." Nathan looked at the table. "I didn't show up," he said, after. "I should have, and I didn't." Daniel considered this with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who had been thinking about related matters for 2 years. "You're showing up now," he said. "Yes," Nathan said. "Papa said," Daniel said, "that the timing of things was less important than the doing of them. He said people spent too much time worrying about when and not enough time just doing." "He was right," Nathan said. "He usually was," Daniel said. "About most things." He went back to his snack. "He would have liked this," he said. "The books, the learning, Eleanor teaching us here." "I know," Nathan said. "I think," Daniel said, "he would have liked you doing it." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," Daniel said, with the complete matter-of-fact of someone who had said something true and saw no reason to make more of it. He asked her about the job applications on a Friday, not intrusively, after the children had gone. In the kitchen with the tea that had become the end of Friday ritual, the particular quiet of a house that had been full and was settling back into itself. 8 months, he said. "Any progress?" "2 interviews," she said. "Nothing yet." "What kind of school are you looking for?" "Any," she said. "But ideally," she paused, "ideally a school that understands that education is not a product. That it's not about outputs and metrics and performance tables." She looked at her tea. "Most schools now are managed like businesses. The children are the product. The results are the revenue. And you want something different," he said. "I want," she said. "What happens in this living room, where a child asks a question because they want to know the answer, not because it will be on the test." He looked at her. "What if," he said, "the living room became something more permanent?" She looked at him. "I have a foundation," he said. "Ashworth Education Initiative. It funds programs in under-resourced communities." He paused. "It doesn't have a director. It's been running on a board and good intentions for 2 years." "Nathan, the salary is significant," he said. "The resources are available. And the mandate is exactly what you just described. Education that is not a product." She stared at him. "You're offering me a job," she said. "I'm offering you," he said, "the job you were already doing, with resources and a title and the ability to do it for more than 6 children in my living room." She looked at her tea. "This is because of James," she said. "Partly," he said, "and partly because I have watched you teach for 3 weeks, and I know what I'm looking at." He held her gaze. "I build things. I know quality when I see it." She was quiet for a long time. "Yes," she said. "All right. Good," he said. "Nathan," she said, single quotes, "yes. The cleaning," she said. "I'll need to find you someone else." "Yes," he said. Although, he added, the house was considerably cleaner than it had been. She almost laughed. "I did both," she said. "I want you to know that. The cleaning was done before they arrived." "I know," he said. "I checked." "You checked," she said. "I told you," he said. "I know quality when I see it." The living room remained the classroom. Not officially. There was now a proper space, funded by the foundation, in the community center on Carver Street, with books and tables and the particular warmth of somewhere built for the purpose. But on Fridays they still came to Nathan's house. He had not suggested this. The children had. Marcus had said, on the first Friday after the community center opened, "Can we still do Fridays at Nathan's?" With the particular directness of a 7-year-old who wants something and has decided asking is the most efficient route. Nathan had said yes before Eleanor could manage the question. Eleanor had looked at him. He had shrugged. "Friday is Friday," he said. Daniel came every Friday. He and Nathan had developed, over months, the particular relationship of two people who had loved the same person and were finding in each other the parts of that person that hadn't gone. They played chess. James had taught Daniel. Nathan had taught James. The particular inheritance of a game passed through friendship. Daniel was getting better. Nathan told him this honestly, which Daniel received with the satisfaction of someone who had been working toward it. "Papa would have beaten you by now," Daniel said. "Probably," Nathan said. "He was very good." Daniel said, "The best I ever played," Nathan said. "I'm going to be better," Daniel said. With the complete certainty of someone who had decided. "Yes," Nathan said. "You are." He came home early. He found her on his floor teaching children who had nowhere warm to go. He recognized one of the faces, and everything he had been managing from a distance for 2 years arrived. She had promised a dying man she would look after his son. She had lost her job. She had taken cleaning work to survive. And every afternoon between 2 and 5 she had taught children on a pavement in November, because not teaching would have been worse than everything else. He had been building something for 15 years. He had $6 billion. He had a house with rooms he didn't use, and a foundation with no direction, and the best friend he had been grieving by working. One woman on his floor with 6 children and open books changed all of it. Here is what we learned. The most important thing you will ever do is show up. Not when it's convenient. Not when you're ready. Not when you've processed everything properly. Just show up. She showed up for James's son when she had nothing. He showed up for James's son 3 years late. Daniel said, "You're showing up now." That was enough. It is always enough. Show up.